Lido Island Railway started back in 1894. The island itself was far behind the rest of the nation when it came to using the rails, as various settlements and communities were only linked for a while by dirt roads and beaten paths. When people ask what Lido Island was like, I always say it was a land trapped in time. I mean, the whole place still using horses and carts. There was maybe 5 households with cars. Bigger machines like cranes and farming equipment were few and far between as well. When I taught a class at Oxford, a student joked and said this place would be a literal Amish paradise. He might have been joking, but that was honestly an incredibly true statement. Frustrated at the island's slow crawl to the future, the governor of Lido Island, Jeremy Starcer, commissioned avid rail enthusiast and industrialist Harold Strallen to build the island's brand new rail system. Strallen had been obsessed with the railways for years. He traveled to America to see them, and he would stare at them going by on the mainland. His study was full of drawings of trains. He was honestly obsessed with them. Strallen's family business was in machinery. They built the engines he put in boats. Their factories built several steam engines for various companies such as the Furness Railway, the GNR, the Lancashire and Yorkshire. So building a factory on Lido Island and partnering with these rail companies was fairly easy. Because of the scope of the project, Strallen brought on his old friend Wallace Cromwell to help him. Cromwell and Strallen were thick as thieves. They went to the same boarding school, the same university. He was his most trusted companion, so Cromwell agreed to go to Lido Island to build this railway. However, they were building a brand new railway from the ground up. If it went bust, the company was going to suffer dreadfully from it. Strallen had to show Cromwell the benefit from this. He agreed to do it after he had to be convinced. I mean, he was the money man. And with also worrying about finances, he had to worry about labor, construction costs, possible taxes, not to mention getting a fleet of engines to run this railway. So there was a lot to consider in this. However, once Cromwell agreed, and after months of negotiations, the Lido Island Railway had a working fleet. Before long, he had also helped raise to build large sections of tracks, marshalling yards, and sheds, and soon the Lido Island Railway had been fully completed. However, while the railway was flourishing, another rail company just south of it was starting to come up as well. This company was the Canewood, Brashac and Nassau Railway, or the KBNR. This rail company was run by Cromwell and Strallen's old rival, Bennet Connon. The three had been rivals for years, and Connon, wanting to try and upstage him, had decided to build his own rail company starting from the small town and upcoming city of Canewood. Many could argue that all Connon wanted to do was to spite Strallen and Cromwell. I mean, the timing couldn't be ignored. This railway popped up around the same time theirs was becoming popular. While the company did well for a time, Connon never really considered the cost that went into such things. As a result, the company spent far more than they earned. This gave Strallen and Cromwell an opportunity to expand the line. Strallen and Cromwell went to Connon to propose a merger of the two companies. Connon, however, in his anger and his bitterness, refused to listen to reason. In 1912, the KBNR went bust, and Connon was forced to sell the company to Strallen and Cromwell. His loss was tragic, however he got a generous sum, even though considering the state the railway had been left in, some people would have bought it for a halfpenny on the dollar. World War I broke out in 1914, and the railway became instrumental to the war effort. Trains loaded with ammunition, soldiers, and weapons bustled around the countryside. And in 1918, when the war ended, the king bestowed Strallen and Cromwell with their respective knighthoods. But then the Railways Act was passed in 1921, and the Lido Island Railroad found themselves in a very awkward place. At the time, the rail systems of Britain were an absolute mess. If you look at a map back during that time, it looks like a twisted bramble. So, Parliament's way to fix this was to pass the Railways Act to condense the various lines and railways into only 4 big companies. But this left Lido Island in a very precarious position. Stralin and Grommel had a mix of engines of different builds from multiple different companies. They never had any sort of loyalty to one particular one. Even when the Big Four was formed, they basically had a hodgepodge of engines. They just needed them to service a line. They weren't trying to promote a certain company, a certain brand, or anything like that. Lido Island was positioned so that the Southern Railway, the London North Eastern Railway, and the London Midland and Scottish Railway were able to lay claim to the territory. This was especially bad because the LMS and the LNER were both fighting over control over their territory on Sodor, and gaining Lido Island would only be able to strengthen that one company. Though Stralin and Cromwell both were offered several positions at all of these companies, they refused them all, citing the fact that Lido Island should remain its own independent rail system. In 1922, when he was brought before Parliament to answer for his lack of cooperation, he cited several practices by the Big Four, mainly the 3 companies after Lido Island, that they were using very unethical and even dangerous practices in order to obtain the land. Many tried to dismiss these claims as false or unsubstantiated, only Stralin brought evidence. Just before going to Parliament, Stralin hosted several men on his personal estate for a hunting trip. There are several accounts of who these men were: private detectives, Scotland Yard, members of the Irish mob. Regardless of their affiliations, stories about the LMS, the LNER, and the SR soon broke the news. To be honest, no one knows what they discussed exactly, not even Cromwell. To quote Hamilton, no one else was in the room where it happened. The findings came out in the Guldrew Arms Chronicle, a large newspaper that was very popular on Lido Island, and it was run by Sir Carson Napier, an avid fan of both journalism and the railroads. Thomas Lawson, the candidate for the LMS, had tried to free Stralin and Cromwell out of their position by bribing some of the board members of the LIR. Barn Jameson of the SR was outed for having an affair with the wife of one of the Lido Island station managers. Finally, Vernon Stroker of the LNER was exposed for embezzling millions from the company and hiding them in banks in Jamaica. With the companies exposed and the public on edge, Parliament had no choice but to allow Lido Island to operate as its own independent rail system, a declaration that was previously applied to the narrow gauge lines. After that, Stralin and Cromwell maintained their positions as co-directors for a very long time. However, that all changed one fateful day.
I am speaking to you from the Cabinet Room at 10 Downing Street. This morning, the British ambassador in Berlin handed the German government a final note stating that unless we heard from them by 11 o'clock, that they were prepared at once to withdraw their troops from Poland, a state of war would exist between us. I have to tell you now that no such undertaking has been received, and that consequently this country is at war with Germany.
With World War II breaking out, Lido Island once again became a driving force for the war effort. Engines from all over Britain came to Lido Island to support the war effort. Trains loaded with weapons, soldiers and ammunition bustled around, ready to be shipped out or set to defend the island from invaders. Though fear gripped the country, the island persevered. Citizens signed up in droves at recruiting stations, spread the word to support the war effort, and even volunteered to assist the railway. With this great show of patriotism, the railway managed to become a driving force for Britain's defense once again. Despite all the support and patriotism, the island would not be spared from tragedy. Several people were killed in the Blitz, one of them being Strallen's son Martin, who was on his way to be deployed. This was an incredibly heartbreaking loss for both Strallen, Cromwell, and the fleet of engines. Cromwell's two sons, James and Andrew, had already been killed. Both had perished in the Battle of El Agheila in Africa. When it was all over and the Axis forces finally surrendered, Lido Island had managed to persevere, but there was still a lot of work to be done to rebuild from all the damage that was caused. However, years after the war had ended, Lido Island would face its next great challenge, this one from the British government itself. But that will have to wait until next time.